we can trust in God's plan. God told us that he has plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. And so we trust within the character of God that he will do what he says, that his character is good, and that he's on our side. We have to trust that God will provide the things that we need, not all the things that we want. That God will indeed provide the things that we need. If you really think about it, how many things do we actually need? It's kind of funny because, again, I talk about my great-grandmother. She made quite the impression on me. I only knew her for a few years, right? I knew her as a small child. I would go visit her on the chicken farm. That made a huge impression on me, seeing her live there. They didn't have running water at her farm. Can you believe this? They did not have running water at the farm. They would literally go downhill to the nearby creek and haul water up by milk cans. And I'm talking, this is like 1970. And they're hauling water up by milk cans and boiling it and getting it ready. And that's all the water that you had for the day. Okay? I will never forget that first time that she's like, well, let me make dinner. And she walked outside, grabbed a chicken by the neck, swung it around a couple of times and went boom and snapped its neck, and then took a hatchet, which I don't know where she got it from, because that is a scary thought. I didn't see it, but suddenly it appeared and that chicken lost its neck. I'm like, and then she just casually just plucked it, and I'm like, what was that? My grandmother is some kind of psycho who can magically make hatchets appear. She made the impression on me as a spot. And then I didn't get to see her again until she was advanced in years and she moved out here and all that kind of stuff. And she made quite the impression on me because she was impossible to buy anything for. Oh, it was horrible. You know, Mother's Day, her birthday, Christmas, great-grandma, what do you want? Great-grandma, what do you want for Christmas? Nothing. No, I got everything I need. See, because she always thought in terms of need. You say, well, Grandma, how about I buy you a dress? Oh, no. I got a whole closet full of dresses. I can't even wear them all. She had like 4. You can only wear one dress at a time. Grandma, Grandma, do you need like something more practical? How about some sheets for your bed? Well, I got 2 sets of sheets. You sleep on one and wash the other. I don't need any more. You're making this difficult, Grandma, right? You must want something. But no, she only wanted what she needed. Oftentimes, you know what I ended up buying her? Hey, Grandma, I got you 5 pounds of coffee. Oh, I love my coffee. Thank you. Because that's something she needed. Oh, and she made the worst coffee ever. Okay, I'll use Starbucks snobs, okay? Okay, let me just tell you, okay? She had one of those, she brought it from the frickin' farm. And I'm like going, you know, we have other things that make better coffee. But she had one of those great big things. She just poured the water in and the coffee together, and it just sat on the stove and slowly boiled away all day until it was like syrup. You know, and she'd drink this stuff. And I thought, oh, man, you want a cup of coffee? No, I do not want a cup of coffee. Grandma, how about I buy you a drip coffee maker? Well, what would I need one of those for? They break down, right? I've had this one for 40 years. It works just fine. Never mind. But she trusted in God's provision, that God would provide everything she needed. She often talked about that. She wasn't, big on going to church a lot, but she talked about how God always took care of her. She said, well, all during the Depression, she said, we had the farm. We raised enough food to feed ourselves, and we had the chickens, and they gave us eggs. And so we were fine. God gave us everything we needed because she never needed that much, apparently. But we need to trust in God's provision to give us what we needed. If you really evaluated your life and you stripped away all the things that you want down to your basic needs, wouldn't you say that you have what you need? Most of us will go home today and we have a house. Most of us will go, and for some of us, like myself, we're going over to El Torito to feast upon a buffet. I have more food than I will ever need. God provides. We can trust that. Come now, you rich people. Weep and wail for the miseries that are coming to you. Your riches have rotted, and your clothes are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have rusted, and their rust will be evidence against you. And it will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure for the last days. Listen, The wages of the laborers who mow your fields, which you kept back by fraud, cry out. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on the earth in luxury and in pleasure. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the righteous one who does not resist you. He's talking about those who are wealthy. Anybody ever read the biographies of some of the wealthy families here in the United States? How they got their wealth? It's not pretty. Many of them defrauded. Many of them manipulated stock markets. They made a lot of their money illegally, and they have kept their money through illegal means and by rigging a system. And what God is saying to these people is, you know what? All those people you defrauded, all those things that you did, that's going to come back to haunt you. You have been unrighteous. You will have to pass through the fires of purification for that, because you have obtained what you're trusting in illegally. You haven't learned to trust in the Lord. In the kingdom of God, riches obtained by exploiting others brings discipline rather than reward. Think about it. We have corporations that so underpay their employees that even if they work full time, they still have to live in their cars. I'm thinking specifically, what's that evil empire just down the street? Disney. Disney, who charges you $200 for a lightsaber, can't afford to pay their employees who sell it to you. Their employees are living in cars because they're so underpaid. Is that right? Shouldn't that corporation be sharing the wealth that they're generating off of the labor of their employees? Isn't that the right thing to do? I can guarantee you that the heads of that corporation, who are sucking up all the profits and hoarding it to themselves, are storing up discipline for themselves much later. Jesus is not going to look at them and go, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You've exploited many and acquired great wealth. Come on in." I remember an old story that one of my former pastors told long, long ago. It's about a man who was nearing death, very wealthy man, very, very wealthy man, nearing death. And so he began to bargain with God. And he argued with God, until he finally wore God out, because he wanted to take it with him. And he argued with God, and he said, "At least one suitcase. Let me take one suitcase." And God finally said, "All right, you take one suitcase." And so at his death, he had packed a suitcase full of gold bars. And when he dies, he gets to heaven. And when he gets to heaven, he's greeted by St. Peter. And St. Peter says, "Oh, you're the one that God allowed to bring something with him. You got to take it with you. What'd you bring?" The wealthy man opens up his suitcase and shows it all full of gold bars. And St. Peter looks at him and says, "I don't get it. You could have brought anything, and you brought pavement." Really? Why are we working for the things of this world and to hoard the things of this world when we know on the other side there is something so much better? You know what we get to take with us? What do we get to take with us? Hopefully it's not pavement. How many people have read the book Pilgrim's Progress? Yeah? Then you know what we get to take with us, right? Because many people offered to join him on his journey and go to the celestial city, but what did he get to take with him? Only his righteousness and good deeds. Those were the only things that would cross with him into the celestial city. That's all we get to take. And yet, we spend it on wealth, which we know will not last. Exploiting others for wealth is unrighteous. Wealth will not save you from judgment. In fact, it'll probably bring judgment on you for how you acquired that wealth. I'm not saying money's bad. I'm not saying don't save for the future. I'm not saying don't plan for your retirement, baby boomers. That's why baby boomers won't retire, because they can't. They've been having too much fun. I'm saying be responsible, but don't be chasing after that. That's not your end goal, is to just acquire a lot of wealth. Your end goal is to be a righteous person. Your end goal is to bless other people, however God blesses you. So how do we live this all out? What does this mean? When we talk about, hey, when God says to you, don't be making these plans about going off and all, what this really is all about is a contrast. Don't live according to your plans, what you think you need, chasing after all this worldly stuff, but instead turn to the Lord and say, Lord, whatever you will, that's what I'm going to do. Not the things of this world, but the things of the kingdom. And so he's saying, trust in God and acknowledge that he's the one you're supposed to be pursuing and chasing after. So how do we live it out? Well, these verses are not a license to be irresponsible. Please don't just go, well, I'll just trust the Lord day by day and not save, not plan, not invest, not do anything. No. You still need to be doing those things. But that's not what's going to bring you the ultimate security. How about earn an honest dollar? Now, my other great-grandmother, on my father's side, was a lady missionary. And she's always she was an interesting person too. She was, how to describe her? I don't know, Fundagelical to the core. She was very strict. She's kind of cold. She was, very religious kind of woman. But she did say a couple of good things. I remember her telling me, she said, grandson, there will be more people in hell for pushing a pencil than firing a gun. Because she also did not trust those. She didn't trust banks. She had moved through the Great Depression as well. And she didn't trust those who defrauded people of their wealth. She didn't like banks either. Those pencil-pushing accountants who robbed her of her money. But she always said, it doesn't matter what job you do in life, as long as you're earning an honest dollar. Any job is a good job, as long as it's an honest dollar. Whether you're sweeping floors, mopping floors, picking up trash for somebody else. I joke about this all the time. I'm only a couple generations removed from hillbilly, right? I came from families that worked as maids to earn an honest dollar, and that was their philosophy. Any dollar that's earned honestly, that's a good dollar. But you should be ashamed of any dollar that you would earn taking advantage of somebody else. That's what brings shame to you. So earn an honest dollar. Think about what you do. Are you trying to get ahead in life by ripping off somebody else? Have you become part of a system that says, I will exploit you so that I can gain? Because that's the kind of things that Christ calls us to avoid at all costs. Practice the righteousness of the kingdom. And again, we got to keep coming back to this. What does righteousness mean? It's the fair and equitable treatment of other people. How do you treat other people? Are you treating them fairly? Are you treating them as equals, equitably? Are you doing unto them as you will have done unto you? Because that's what righteousness means. You want to be a righteous person, you have to treat people correctly. Are you choosing to do this? Or are you choosing to exploit them? Oh, there's two interesting characters. Anybody know who they are? One is John Wesley. He's on my left. So what would that be? Your left too? Yeah? And that's his brother Charles on the right. John, of course, founder of Methodism. Charles, big hymn writer. They were both involved in ministry. Charles wrote a lot of hymns. John wrote a few himself. But they oftentimes would talk to each other. And there was this reported conversation, you find this in one of John Wesley's letters, where he said that his brother Charles always said, if the Lord would give me wings, I'd fly. To which John replied to his brother, because there's sibling rivalry, if God bids me fly, I will trust him for the wings. And he's saying that we always need to trust God to provide for us whatever he calls us to do. God calls us to righteousness. God calls us to treat others well. And we can trust that he will provide us everything we need to fulfill that. That we don't have to try to take care of ourselves, and accumulate a lot of wealth and exploit others and treat others poorly to take care of our needs. But instead that he will provide everything that we need.